What's going on, y'all? So I was messaged a question about how to apply what I put in the last video to the real you. I'm sorry, the real life, right? To, I guess, a practical explanation of understanding what I put in the last video, which was mastery of self. Um, so I have this belief, and I believe that alchemists also have this belief, even if they're conscious of it or not, that we must understand the human nature of people, not just of ourselves, but the people around us. You know, lately I've been talking to my son about his relationship with his mother, right? Well, him and his siblings' relationship with their mother. And she has things in her personality that she never resolved when she was younger. And they've turned into toxic characteristics. And we all know people like that. You knew them as children and you kind of saw it coming, you know what I mean? You saw that they were manipulative as children and they never dealt with it. And now as an adult, they'll be manipulative. And what happens is if you deny, because we like to think of ourselves as being more intelligent than we are, or more autonomous than we really are. We think we are better than we are, right? When you ask someone, "Would you cheat?" and everybody says, "No, I would never cheat." Or if I found money on the ground, I would try to find the owner and stuff like. Y'all know goddamn well that's not what people would do. You know what I'm saying? And so, and that's natural. That's human nature. That's not hypocritic. It's just it's human nature to be hypocritical to a point, right? So I'm sorry for this wind blowing. I know I need to get a microphone or something, but bear with me. I'm leaning in, hoping that you can hear me better than on previous videos. Yeah, we must understand the parts of our psyche that we have suppressed in order to fit in. You know, even as children, our parents are molding our personalities by teaching us, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," or "You shouldn't act this way," or don't behave this way." And of course, I mean, parents got to do that in order to teach us how to survive in the social world. But we also have to understand that there are parts of our personalities that will never go away. And even when you suppress them, they'll find a way of manifesting themselves involuntarily often, and usually more exaggerated than they really are. If I know that I am a normally manipulative person, like myself as a child, I understood. I was the type that used to sit back and people watch, right? When you people watch and you can see the dynamics of power between people, somebody bullying another guy. I remember, what's his name? A guy named Fat Mo. I grew up, and everybody from my neighborhood knows who Fat Mo is. He's dead now, but I had some pretty memorable fights with this guy as a teenager and as an adult. And the thing about Fat Mo was he was a bully when we were kids, and I watched him with another kid named Reggie. Reggie played football, but Reggie was a soft kid. I think his mom put him in football to try to toughen him up. And but he was a tough kid. He just didn't realize he was tough. And I watched him get pushed around by this kid named Fat Mo, who was not physical at all. This kid, he was just a big boy who had this aggressive trait in his personality. And I watched Reggie push back a little bit, and then Mo retreated. And it was something really, really subtle. And I realized, oh, wow, Mo's actually scared of anybody who's willing to fight back. And then what he did was he never messed with Reggie again. And what he did, he picked on other kids. So when it was my turn, um, in those days, I still kind of, I was still kind of new to the United States, and I didn't understand that culture, that I guess that urban culture. You know what I'm talking about? That urban city tough boy culture. I didn't really understand it. So when Mo picked on me, I was on monkey bars, and I jumped down and I punched him. and he ran home. And we were at a skating rink years later. I think I was maybe 12 at that time. And years later, we were at a skating rink, and he had put on a little bit of muscle. I think he was playing football or something, and challenged me to fight at a skating rink, and I beat him again. But I noticed he came at me with, I'm tough now. He had this kind of attitude, like, it ain't gonna go down like it did when we were kids. And I ended up having, I had 3 fights total in high school, and I had one as an adult with him, when I was with my first wife. But I guess I was one of those kids that, because every time we got into a fight, it was in front of other people and they laughed and stuff like that. So he felt like he needed to redeem himself to come back. And so what ended up happening in our 20s was that he kind of went straight gangster and got himself mixed up in this wrong group of guys, and he got shot. He got killed. So, but what happens is he had a part of his personality that he never resolved, and it resulted in his death. With me, I realized in my personality that I could play people's their personalities against them, and I guess you could call that manipulative. I was somewhat manipulative, but to me, I recognize it as a skill, and I used to run circles around people. If I could sense insecurities in people, and whether we were talking about debating with white boys about politics and race and race relations, stuff like that, or we were talking about guys in the boxing gym who were really bitches, but they were trying to pretend they were tough guys. I could sense that, and I could, like a thumb screw, I could pick at it and bring out the bitch in you. You know what I'm saying? I could use it for my benefit to make myself look better. I know that's bad, but uh, that is something that I did. It was something that I recognized I had a knack for, and I use it to my benefit. And that's an example of what I'm talking about when I talk about self mastery. Is take every trait in you and turn it into a positive. Use it to your advantage. Now, what I ended up doing with that kind of understanding of human nature that I had learned early on as a kid by observing, I was able to use that as a manager, both to get poor employees uh, uh, poor performing employees to improve, and then also to deal with the power structure that I dealt with. Um, I worked in an office with a lot of people that wanted my job. Well, I shouldn't say in my office, but I worked in a region where there were people who wanted my job, and they felt that they were better at my job than I was. And so I was able to use that knowledge of human nature and understanding behavior and thinking, and to kind of crush my enemies, and to shut up those who had doubts. If I sensed that you had doubt, oh, I was gonna murder you. You know what I'm saying? And then at the same time, I also used it. The COO of my company was a good man, a white guy, good man. He had somewhat bigoted um, tendencies, but he didn't recognize them. And in our conversations, because we used to talk a lot, we had a lot of lawsuits going on in my region, and we'd end up talking business on the phone a lot. And then, of course, when I'd go to Pasadena, we talked a lot. But I was able to get him to think about race and think about discrimination within our company, and to look at himself. And I'll give you an example. Um, what year was that? We took over the Bay Area contract maybe in 2005, I think. 2004, 2005. And I went from area manager to regional manager. So he sends me to San Ramon, which eventually became the Oakland office. But he sent me to San Ramon, and he wanted me to take a look around and get a feel for the office, because we needed a manager there. So my first day in the office, at the end of the day, um, I called him. I was staying in a hotel and it was a restaurant in the same parking lot. And he asked me, what do I think it needed? And I told him, his name was Lance. Lance, you need color. And he says, no, I'm not talking about artwork and shit like that. He says, and I told him, no, I'm talking about color. What do you mean? You have an area, 200 employees, most of whom are black. Not one black person in the office, not one black manager among them. We have what we call site managers, which are, they manage that particular site, also known as captains. And all of them were white. And I told him that only makes sense to a white guy. And he immediately goes, Maurice, I am not racist. I didn't say you're a racist. But you can have racist practices without being a racist yourself. Because one of the things is about human nature is you have to reaffirm people's beliefs about themselves. Remember I said everybody believes that they are intelligent, more intelligent than they are. They think they're more ethical than they really are. And they think they are autonomous. They believe that nobody has influence over me. Every decision I make, I made it. Right? So in the process of persuasion or manipulation or seduction, however you want to call it, you must confirm people's beliefs about themselves. And Lance had this need to believe that he was morally a good guy. So if I had said that practice is racist and left it at that, then he would have taken offense to it. He would have become defensive, and nothing I said would have sunk into his ears. But by reaffirming that, by saying, Lance, I know you're not racist, but I'm telling you there is a racist practice going on. And I said, explain why 200 black people, many of whom have college degrees, some of whom have master's degrees, many of them have military experience, have supervisory experience, management experience, and you have not hired not one black person to manage any of those sites. Explain that. How is that possible? And of course, I was able to get him to talk with me about it until he realized, holy shit, you're right. I said, imagine if it were the other way around. I have a region, all white people, all my managers are black. How would you feel about that? So what ended up happening was, the next morning I wake up and there's a memo in every manager's box, not just in California. I was in a Western region, but in the company. He sent it to every manager in the company, and we were a company with 25,000 employees and many different countries, but we were all over the United States, and all of us had a memo from Lance saying, we are a non-discriminating company and we will practice it. And I was so proud of that dude, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna stay here because I can't work for racist people. But anyway, the bottom line was I was able to sense something in his personality, and I was able to use it like a thumb screw and twist it and get him to see that that the practice was wrong. As a matter of fact, let me say this. One of the things I mentioned was if we were to go to Fair Housing and Employment, which is in the state of California, it's a agency that oversees discrimination in the workplace and in residential and in real estate or residential, I forgot what it's called. But anyway, if we were to end up in court with a discrimination suit, how could you defend that? You say no qualified applicants, but if I produce for you 50 resumes, all of whom meet the requirements of that position, there's no way you could explain that. We would excuse me, I shouldn't say the company. The company would lose that lawsuit. You know what I'm saying? And it was good because what ended up happening in that office is that we ended up with a majority of black managers during the time that I was there. I think from that point forward, I was only in the company 4 more years, and I was able to see. We started out with Jones, and we ended up with Braxton. So black managers immediately after, and area managers, and then we had black SGMs at site managers at most of the sites. So that was a positive. So but like I said, the reason why I was able to do that, and let me tell you, I've even used this in relationships. Some of y'all who who have had relationships with me, this is a confession, that I was able to manage the relationship that we had using this knowledge. You know what I'm saying? And then, of course, I've always tried to teach it to people I was involved with. I teach it to my kids. I teach it to my friends. Um, so everything can be turned into a positive, even things that are deemed negative. Now, here's another thing. Understanding human nature also helps you understand people around you. So, my son, for example, having issues with his mother, um, you cannot change your mom's. Yeah, you can cut her off, but that is not what the higher man does. What the higher man does is understand the nature of why my mother is like this, or my spouse is like this, or why my boss is like this. If you're stuck with that person, you actually can manage it so that you can get along. If anything, um, when you understand why someone is the way that they are. For example, you look at somebody that's limping, right? And to one person, they'll just say, "Oh, he'll never be able to play a sport because he's limping. He's got that problem." But if you understand why he's limping, maybe he's got an injury, so you know that when the injury heals, he'll probably be able to play ball. Or um, there's a problem in his knee or problem in his hip. When I understand what's causing it, then it increases the chances that I'll be able to fix it. But if I just brush it off as, "Oh, he's got a limp, he's handicapped," or "She's toxic, I'll leave her alone," then you miss the opportunity to save the friendship or save the relationship, or, you know what I'm saying? This person that's limping misses the opportunity to heal the problem that's preventing them from playing ball, you know? Um, and if you cannot rectify it, you cannot fix it, you learn how to live with it. It's kind of like how special needs adults, right? As children, maybe they had ADHD or maybe more. They had Down syndrome or something like that. They can't just give up on life. They have to learn how to live with this condition that they have. The family has to learn to deal with them with this condition. I cannot treat my son. They say, "Oh, I'll just treat my son like a regular kid, or like a kid like he doesn't have it." You can't do that, because if he has challenges, there are concessions that you'll have to make, right? There are things you will have to do in order to accommodate this person, and get the most out of that relationship. And so that's why it is important to understand the pathology of someone's personalities or psyches, and so when you understand where they're coming from. This person was traumatized as a child. Let's say, for example, just recently, R. Kelly, right? I'm not excusing the fact that had pedophile. He was a pedophile. But once I think it was his brother or somebody said in the press that he had been molested by a neighbor as a child. That explains a lot. You understand? So when you know certain things about their background. Now, I said years ago, the way that he was obsessed with sex, every song, I've been to his shows 3 times. Um, Everything with R. Kelly was about sex. And they say, well, sex sells. Well, it's a little bit more than that, because not everybody, you know, Luther Vandross was probably bigger. Oh, bigger. I don't know. But Luther Vandross was just as big as R. Kelly. He didn't sing about sex, you see. And he was obsessed with it. So I had guessed that he was probably molested as a child. I was right. So when you understand where someone's coming from, it's even harder to get angry at them, because you say, okay, well, I understand. Even though you may look down on that behavior, or you might dislike that behavior, you understand where they're coming from, and they cannot shock you anymore. Dealing with some people. Let me think. An example. Okay, talking about the company I used to work for, the boss that I had. My boss was my immediate boss. He was our director of operations before I took his job. Um, he would throw other he would throw people under the bus. He was quick to do that. He was not going to get in trouble. He was going to take the blame for anything. He was very forgetful, stuff like that. So a couple things I did with him. His name was Johnny. I did everything in writing. If he told me something over the phone, I sent him an email per our phone conversation. This is what you want me to do, and he would respond, "Yes, sir," and I would do it. Things did blow up, and which leads me to one of the 48 laws of power. You win arguments through actions, not arguments. If I had said, Johnny, that's not going to work, he would argue with me all day long. So the way that I demonstrated was, are you sure? Yes. Okay, well, I see it differently. I don't care. This is what I want you to do. Send him an email. According to our phone conversation, this is what you want me to do. He responds, yes. I did it. Shit blows up. He can't throw me under the bus. Okay? But here's something else I did. He disappeared from the office a lot. As did I, except I was working. I used to go to my karate school and work on my laptop there, my computer there, or I would go to Starbucks because when I was in office, I couldn't get shit done, especially when he was around. But he was gone. He was usually chasing women when he was gone. So a lot of his tasks I started to do for him. And he had me reading his email. So I could get into his email and respond to his requests and things like that. And I would give him something I called a sit rep, where I would do I would start with uh, um, summarizing his emails, the important emails, and then I would write out what I had done on his behalf. I would write out what needed to be done the next day. And then if there was anything that I couldn't do that he had to do, I would put that out. And so once a day, he would look at this report and he would get the whole 8 hours worth of shit in one report. So that if he was ever questioned of what was going on, well, I gave it actually two sit reps. One sit rep that was passed down to me from other managers, I would compile it and give it to him. So he knew what was going on in all the locations. And then I had a personal sit rep where, like I said, I was doing his job. So when I had a baby in 2007 and I took a baby bonding leave. And when I did that, the operation really fell apart. I know a lot of people say that, but it really did. Shit fell apart. And when I came back, he had already been counseled a couple of times because the person that did my job for me while I was on baby bonding leave didn't do his job for him. And then certain tasks that he did, he didn't do well. So when I come back, my boss is in trouble. I resumed doing it, but I demonstrated my worth to him because when I wasn't there, stuff fell apart. So eventually he got to a point where he protected the shit out of me. If I wanted to, we had a young lady that was there, little lesbian chick, and she had a habit of accusing everybody of sexual harassment. Every time she get pissed off, that's how she handled shit. And I had been married to somebody like that. I mean, she wasn't like that when we were married, but I saw the tendencies. And after we split up, every place that she worked, including when she was in grad school, she pulled it everywhere she went. So I was very familiar with that. And I used that knowledge in dealing with her. Well, what ended up happening was she was calling off excessively, and I had to write her up for the call offs. And she put a sexual harassment on me. And let me tell you what Johnny did. Johnny approached her, and behind closed doors, whatever he said to her, she wrote a letter of apologizing and said, I misinterpreted what was going on. I don't want to see him get in trouble. It didn't go down quite. She said I somewhat exaggerated or something like that. And but I mean, I wasn't going to get in trouble anyway, but it was very stressful to have this kind of false accusation put on you. And But it was kind of disastrous though, because it led to like other rumors going on in the office, but that was no big deal. But the thing was, that he went to bat like that for me because I made myself valuable. I made myself unkillable. You know, there's a story about a storyteller and the king. I don't know if you've heard this parable. So the king had used to bring storytellers in to tell him a story, and if he didn't like the story, he'd kill you. He would have you executed. So being sent to the king to tell him his bedtime stories was a death sentence. The storyteller in this story was very smart, and what he did was he come in, he would tell a story, and he would put a hook at the end. The person died, but then 3 days later they heard noises coming from the grave, and they dug him up, and then he'd end the story with that. And then he would let the king go to bed. And of course, the king was so hooked, I got to find out what happened the next day. And so what ended up happening was the storyteller told a series, like a soap opera. You know what I'm talking about? A never-ending story that always ended with a hook. And he did that until the king died of old age. And he managed to keep his head. So what was the point of that? Oh, you make yourself valuable. You create value in the person so that they need you and they will protect you. Though, oh, I said all that to say this, that learning how people work, knowing what's going on. When you meet someone and they're toxic, instead of just writing that person off like that person's an asshole, try to understand more about them, find out about their background. Now, there are things I'll probably I will make another video on how to get someone to like you. There are techniques you can do to make someone like you. And the process is you get that person to identify with you, get that person to like you, and then you start digging into their past. Find out as much as you can about them. It helps you understand them, right? And you can do this on the job, you can do this in relationships. It helps you understand why they are the way that they are, and then you can master the power dynamic or the relationships dynamic. You understand? You can rid yourself of toxic relationships and feuds and battles, unnecessary battles with people. And so, like I said, there's two parts of it. On one hand, it's understanding people around you so that you know how to deal with them. On the other hand, it's understanding yourself so that you can develop yourself to go beyond what you are. When people talk about the higher self, the bigger mission, we're always making these New Year's resolutions because we are searching for an improved version of me, right? And they always say it's deep within you, and it's not. The philosopher Nietzsche says the higher self is not deep within you; it's high above you. It is the ultimate version of yourself. And yes, the clues are deep inside, but you have to elevate themselves. You have to elevate those things to a higher consciousness. You have to bring it to consciousness in order to tweak it and, like again, master it to make it an improved version of who you are. But you have to dig and find out where they are. And like I said, not just the good things that are within you, but the bad things, because those bad things can be leveraged and turned into an advantage for yourself. So anyway, let me think about this subject a little bit more, and I will do a third video on this mastery of self stuff. But now, in the thing of alchemy, we will get back on it, like I said, something more concrete about how the alchemist can achieve anything he wants out of life or she wants out of life, right? Earlier today, just about an hour ago, I was talking to a good friend of mine and her business partner, and they were talking about they had started a business and they were looking for ways to improve business, how to bring more business through the door. And he asked me about financing. Do I know anyone who like an angel investor? And my answer to him was, I don't believe in bringing outside sources and borrowing money or getting grants to finance what I want. As an alchemist, and I didn't tell him this, but as an alchemist, I believe in creating my own wealth and self uh, um, raising my own capital, self investing. And that is a very, I have a video earlier. I did it maybe about 2, 3 years ago. And the title of it is How to Start a Business When You Don't Have Any Money. Go back and look for it. And then I will do a part 2 to that, which is basically how to acquire wealth in a small amount of time. Um, and there's a bigger rule over that, which is how to gain anything you want out of life. Okay. And that's what all this alchemy stuff is about, all this self mastery, how to get the most out of life. All right, you guys, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell button so you get notifications, and we will talk to you guys later. Peace.